Red and blue lights tore across my driveway as 3 patrol cars boxed me in. A woman in a pink blazer stormed up, screaming, fingers shaking inches from my face. "Arrest him. Now." He attacked me on HOA property. Before I could speak, she slapped me sharp, loud enough to taste blood. Gasps, body cams blinking red. I didn't touch her. "This land belongs to the community," she yelled. "He's dangerous." The radio crackled. "Dispatch to units on scene, confirming the property owner." She lunged for the mic. I called 911. "You arrest him." I raised one finger. Barely a signal. The deputies froze. She kept talking. Louder, wilder, every lie recorded. Then the radio came back. "Confirming subject is..." I stepped forward. "Go ahead," I said. "Tell her who she just slapped." Tessa Marlowe didn't wait for permission. She never did. The moment the deputies arrived, she stepped into their space and started issuing orders like the scene belonged to her. "Separate him," she snapped. "Get his hands behind his back. This man is unstable." She didn't ask who owned the land. She didn't ask what happened. She decided. That was her gift, certainty without evidence. She flashed her HOA badge like it was a warrant. "Cedar Ridge Estates has authority here. This parcel is within our community corridor. We're conducting an official survey." She said, "official," the way some people say law slow heavy meant to end arguments. One deputy tried to explain jurisdiction. She cut him off mid-sentence. "I'll file a misconduct report before sunset," she warned. "I know people at the county." Her voice carried. Sharp, practiced. This wasn't her first scene like this. It was just the first time she'd brought police as props. Tessa paced heels, grinding gravel into dust, pointing at my fence, my trees, my driveway. He blocked my vehicle. He refused HOA access. He assaulted me. Each claim landed louder than the last, stacked fast enough to drown out doubt. Up close, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about safety or surveys. It was about control, the kind that only works if everyone else backs down. She glanced at me once more, lips tight with satisfaction. "You people always think private land makes you untouchable," she said. "It doesn't." Then she turned back to the deputies and smiled. "Now, do your job." And that was the moment I knew she had no idea who she was talking to. The trouble didn't start with sirens. It started with a white Range Rover Sport blowing through my gate like it had diplomatic immunity. I heard it before. I saw it, the wrong sound for a farm morning. Tires too fast on gravel. An engine revved like the driver expected the world to move. I turned just in time to see the SUV crest the rise and tear, straight toward me, dust rolling behind it like smoke. It stopped inches from my boots. The door flew open, and Tessa Marlowe climbed out, pink blazer, already creased with rage, sunglasses shoved up into her hair. She didn't ask if she was on private land. She didn't introduce herself. She pointed past me. "We're surveying a trail route today," she said. "Move." I told her once, calm, clear, that she was trespassing and needed to leave. She laughed and walked past me anyway, heels sinking into wet soil, talking into her phone about community access and HOA easements that didn't exist. When I stepped back in front of her, she didn't argue. She slapped me. Open hand. Sharp. Loud enough that the goats went silent. I tasted blood and didn't move. Because in my line of work, the first hit isn't pain, it's evidence. That's when she spun, jumped back into the SUV, and floored it not toward the exit, but across my pasture. She plowed through a row of young saplings I'd been nursing for 3 seasons, crushed irrigation tubing, clipped the fence, and screamed into her phone that a violent farmer was attacking her. And then she called 911. By the time the deputies arrived, she had rehearsed the story. She stood in the middle of my driveway like she owned it, pacing, voice rising with every retelling. "He blocked my vehicle. He assaulted me. He interfered with HOA business." She said HOA like it was a badge and a weapon in one. Deputies Diaz and Mercer stepped out, body cams, blinking red. I stayed quiet. Tessa didn't. She crowded them immediately, lowering her voice just enough to sound reasonable. "This land is part of our community corridor. We've been planning a recreational trail." He refused access and became aggressive. Mercer tried to ask a question. She cut him off. Diaz mentioned jurisdiction. She waved him away. "I'll escalate this to the county if you don't act," she said. "I know people." That was the tell. People who are right don't threaten. They explain. People who want control threaten immediately. She pointed at me again. "Arrest him. Right now." Dispatch crackled over the radio, starting to confirm property ownership. She lunged for the mic. "I'm the caller," she snapped. "Just do your job." The deputies exchanged a look, quick, professional. I gave them a small signal. "Not yet. Let her talk." She talked herself into a corner faster than she realized. While she ranted, Mercer walked the fence line and stopped short at the crushed saplings. Diaz photographed the tire tracks cutting straight through my orchard, the bent posts, the torn irrigation hose bleeding water into the dirt. That's when Tessa slipped. It wouldn't matter once the trail goes in anyway, she said too casually. This section is already earmarked. Earmarked by who? Diaz asked. The board, she said. Then realizing what she'd admitted, she backpedaled. Proposed. For discussion. But the damage was done. She pulled out her phone and shoved it at Mercer, scrolling through emails and a half-baked map with a dotted line that cut clean across my boundary. HOA letterhead. No signatures. No county stamps. Just plans ambitious, sloppy, and illegal. That's when it clicked. This wasn't about a morning survey or a disagreement. This was a land grab. They weren't asking permission because they'd convinced themselves they didn't need it. I looked past her at the broken saplings. 3 years of grafting and pruning gone in seconds. I felt the anger rise hot and immediate, but I let it pass. I'd learned long ago that anger burns fast and leaves you blind. Evidence lasts longer. Dispatch came back on the radio clearer, now asking for confirmation of the property owner. Tessa heard it and stiffened. She tried to talk over it again, voice sharp, breath fast. I told you this is HOA business. I raised my hand once more. Diaz nodded almost imperceptibly. She kept talking, faster, louder, every contradiction stacking neatly on camera, and standing there watching her unravel in real time, I realized something else. She didn't just think she was above me. She thought she was above the law, and that belief was about to cost her everything. Dispatch tried again, firmer this time. Units on scene confirmed the property owner for report accuracy. Tessa's head snapped toward the radio. Her confidence wobbled just for a second. Then she leaned closer to Diaz like proximity could bend reality. You don't need that, she said sharply. I've already explained. This is HOA jurisdiction. Diaz didn't argue. He just asked, "Ma'am, do you have any county filings authorizing entry onto this land?" She scoffed. HOA authority supersedes local misunderstandings. That was the sentence. Mercer looked up from his tablet. Supersedes county records. Yes, she said, too fast. We handle these things internally. I watched Diaz's jaw tighten. The shift was subtle, but I knew it well the moment a deputy stops mediating and starts documenting. Mercer keyed his mic. Dispatch, we're seeing property damage and possible false reporting. Requesting full ownership confirmation and boundary file. Tessa spun on him. You are not authorized to escalate this. Mercer met her eyes. We are. She laughed, brittle and loud. You think a farmer knows zoning better than a board? I finally spoke. This isn't zoning. She rounded on me venomous. You don't get to speak. Diaz raised a hand, not at me, at her. Ma'am, lower your voice. That did it. Her control slipped. I will have both of you written up by tonight, she snapped. I'll call the county sheriff myself. Mercer glanced at me. Diaz did too. I gave the smallest nod. Letter. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands and dialed, pacing like a trapped animal. I need the sheriff, she barked into voicemail. Immediately. This is an emergency. She hung up and turned back to the deputies, chin high again. Enjoy your last few minutes in uniform. Diaz quietly toggled his body cam to full record. Mercer did the same. Red lights blinked. Ma'am, Diaz said evenly, we need a clear timeline. You stated you were assaulted. When did that occur? She jabbed a finger at me. When he blocked my vehicle. And before that, Mercer asked. She hesitated. I was conducting HOA business. On private land, Diaz pressed. She waved him off. That's negotiable. Mercer wrote it down. Diaz continued calm as a metronome. You also told dispatch you were attacked after you exited your vehicle. Yes. And earlier, Diaz said, reading from the call log, you stated you struck him because he refused access. Her mouth opened, closed. That's not what I meant. So you did strike him, Mercer said. She bristled. I defended myself. From what Diaz asked, she snapped. From being told to leave, silence dropped hard. Mercer looked up slowly. You felt threatened. By a verbal instruction, Tessa realized too late what she'd said. She surged forward. You're twisting my words. No, ma'am, Diaz replied. We're recording them. She spun, searching for leverage, for allies, for anything. You can't do this. I represent the community. Diaz nodded toward the crushed orchard. Community doesn't authorize destruction. She laughed again, wild now. You think this ends here? I'll have the sheriff down here in 10 minutes. I stepped forward into the edge of the flashing lights. Don't rush him, I said quietly. He's already on scene. She frowned, confused. What? Diaz glanced at Mercer. Mercer stopped writing. Dispatch crackled one last time, clear as a bell. Units on scene, confirming property owner and reporting party. Subject is Cole Ramsey County Sheriff. The words hung there. Tessa blinked once. Twice. No, she said. That's not. I reached into my jacket, opened my wallet, and let the badge catch the light. Ma'am, I said evenly, I asked you to leave my land. Her face drained. The color vanished so fast it was like someone pulled a plug. Mercer turned his radio back on. Dispatch, confirm again. Confirm dispatch, replied. Sheriff Ramsey. Tessa staggered back a step. You tricked me. I shook my head. You showed me exactly who you are. Diaz straightened. Sheriff, how would you like to proceed? I looked at the broken fence, the crushed trees. The body cam still blinking red. Secure the scene, I said. Document everything. Tessa's voice cracked. You can't arrest me. I met her eyes. I'm not arresting you for who you are. Riley stepped forward with cuffs. I'm arresting you for what you did. The metal clicked shut, and in that sound-sharp final, every ounce of power she thought she had disappeared. The cuffs changed everything. Tessa Marlowe went rigid the moment the steel closed around her wrists, like her body had finally caught up to the truth her mouth refused to accept. The pink blazer that had looked so commanding minutes earlier now hung crooked one sleeve smeared with dust from my driveway. This is outrageous, she shouted, pitching her voice toward the deputies like volume could reverse physics. You're abusing your authority. I demand to speak to the sheriff now. Diaz didn't flinch. Mercer didn't either. They moved with the quiet precision of men who knew exactly where this was headed. You are speaking to him, Diaz said, nodding toward me. Tessa whipped her head around. No, I'm not. You think flashing a badge fixes this? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She lunged forward, forgetting the cuffs, the chain pulling her short. You can't humiliate me like this. I represent hundreds of homeowners. Ma'am, Mercer said evenly, you represent yourself right now. Neighbors had gathered at the far end of the drive, quiet shapes, phones raised but not recording, watching the scene they'd never believed would happen. Tessa noticed them and panicked. Don't just stand there, she yelled at Diaz. Do something. He did. He stepped aside. Diaz tapped his shoulder mic. Dispatch replaying confirmation. The radio answered immediately. Confirmed. Cole Ramsey, County Sheriff. The words cut cleaner than any accusation. Tessa's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Her eyes darted, badge, radio, deputies, neighbors, searching for a version of reality where she still had leverage. Mercer lifted his tablet and turned the screen toward her. Photos scrolled by tire tracks through the orchard, snapped saplings, bent fence posts, timestamps aligned with her call to 911. Then audio, her voice loud and unmistakable. I slapped him because he refused HOA access. She recoiled as if the device had burned her. That's taken out of context, she whispered. Diaz shook his head. It's taken from your mouth. She tried to speak again, words tripping over each other now. I was under stress. We were planning a trail. It's for the community. I stepped closer, just enough for her to hear me over her breathing. You don't get to take what isn't yours and call it service. Her shoulders sagged. The certainty drained out of her posture, leaving something smaller, brittle. Mercer closed the tablet. Sheriff charges? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Criminal trespass, property destruction, filing a false report, assault. Each count landed like a final nail. Tessa shook her head violently. No, this is a misunderstanding. I'll resign. I'll fix it. I'll too late, Diaz said already, guiding her toward the cruiser. She twisted desperate now, eyes locking onto me. Please, you didn't tell me who you were. I met her gaze and held it. Would it have changed how you treated me? She didn't answer. The back door opened. She resisted for half a second, just long enough for everyone to see it, then the fight went out of her. Diaz guided her down. The door closed with a dull final thud. The sound carried. Neighbors murmured. Someone exhaled. The flashing lights reflected off the hood of the cruiser, off the dust in the air, off the badge on my chest. Mercer stepped back. Scene secure. I looked down the driveway at the damage, then past it to the land beyond. Quiet again. Honest. Transport, I said. The cruiser rolled forward gravel, crunching under the tires. Through the rear window, Tessa stared out silent, now watching the authority she'd worn, like a costume disappear behind her. When the lights turned off and the engine noise faded, the driveway felt larger, empty in the right way. Justice hadn't shouted. It had simply arrived and stayed. The driveway didn't explode into applause when the cruiser pulled away. It went quiet. The kind of quiet you only get after a storm passes, and everyone is waiting to see what's left standing. A few neighbors lingered at the edge of the road, people who'd watched this HOA steamroll others for years, but never thought they'd see it stop. No one cheered, no one clapped. They just looked at the broken fence, the crushed saplings, then back at me. One man nodded once. A woman mouthed thank you without sound. Another neighbor stared at the ground like they were rethinking every fine they'd ever paid. Diaz and Mercer stayed put, giving statements into their recorders, methodical and calm, professionals to the end. When they finished, Mercer looked up and said quietly, "You okay, Sheriff?" I touched my cheek where the slap had landed. The sting was gone. What remained was steadiness. "I'm good," I said, and for the first time that day, it was true. Someone from the HOA, one of the board members who'd followed Tessa like a shadow, approached halfway up the drive and stopped unsure. "We didn't know she was going to do this," he said, voice thin. I didn't argue. I didn't lecture. "You know now," I said. That was enough. My phone buzzed. I put it on speaker so no one could say later they hadn't heard it clearly. My county attorney's voice came through, clipped and precise. "Charges are being filed as discussed. Preliminary restitution is set at $14, $600 for property damage. Probation recommended. Assault and false reporting will proceed." A pause. "And Sheriff, effective immediately, the court is issuing a temporary order, barring Miss Marlowe from holding any HOA leadership position. Full-term recommendation, 24 months. A murmur rolled through the small crowd. The attorney continued. "Additionally, the HOA is required to halt any planning or activity within 200 feet of your boundary, pending an independent survey and a full community vote." I thanked him and ended the call. No gavel, no courtroom drama. Just consequences delivered clean and unmistakable right where the damage had been done. Diaz glanced at Mercer. Mercer nodded. "Scene closed," Diaz said. After the deputies left and the neighbors drifted back to their houses, I stayed where I was. Same driveway, same dirt, same fence bent but still mine. I walked the lines slowly, resetting posts by hand, straightening wire where I could. I flagged the saplings that were too far gone and marked the ones that might survive with water and patience. Farms teach you that not everything can be saved, but some things can if you act in time. Another message buzzed on my phone, an email this time. HOA letterhead, short, careful, legal. All trail development plans affecting adjacent private property are hereby suspended. I locked the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. The sun was dropping behind the trees, throwing long shadows across the pasture. Wind moved through the grass. Honest, unbothered wind. The land didn't care about titles or clipboards or bylaws written by people who never set foot in the dirt. It cared about boundaries. I leaned against the fence and breathed it in, the smell of soil, water, and quiet returning to where it belonged. For years, people had told me HOAs only win because no one wants the fight. They were wrong. HOAs win when people stay silent. I wasn't silent today. And as the light faded and the last echo of Sirens disappeared for good, the land settled back into itself, unchanged by ego, unimpressed by power, and exactly where it was supposed to be. Rightfully mine. The rain settled into a steady, punishing rhythm, no longer screaming, just relentless. Neighbors stood under awnings, and garage doors soaked quiet alive. No one cheered. No one said, "I told you so." The adrenaline drained out of the street like water down a storm grate. My daughter slipped her hand into mine. Her palm was still shaking, but her grip was firm. "It listened," she said, looking up at the sensors blinking calmly through the rain. The house listened. Across the cul-de-sac, Celeste stood under the bare light of the Tahoe's open door, wrapped in a deputy's spare rain jacket, clipboard gone. She didn't look at anyone. No one approached her. The authority that once filled the street had evaporated, leaving only a woman exposed to weather she'd tried to ignore. One by one, neighbors nodded at me. Not dramatic, not grateful speeches, just acknowledgement, quiet understanding. People began moving with purpose, closing gates, checking on elderly neighbors, pulling trash bins out of the street. Someone knocked once on my door and left a thermos of coffee on the mat without waiting. The storm kept coming, but the panic didn't. The county supervisor stepped closer to my porch and put his phone on speaker, shielding it from the rain. "This is official notice," a calm voice said from the other end. "Bayou Palms Terrace HOA Board Authority is suspended pending audit. All enforcement actions, fines, liens, and special assessments issued under the emergency protocol are hereby voided." Celeste's head snapped up. "You can't just erase. They're erased," the voice cut in. "Effective immediately." The supervisor nodded to me. "You'll receive written confirmation tonight. County Council is also reviewing obstruction and reckless endangerment charges." A pause. Then, additionally, your weather data feed has already been mirrored to the parish emergency center. It filled a blind spot in our models. I didn't respond. I just listened as the rain hammered the driveway and the sensors continued their steady work. The voice on the phone finished with one final line. No resident safety equipment may be restricted by any future governing body without explicit county approval. The call ended. The supervisor slipped the phone back into his pocket. "You did the right thing," he said simply. He turned, already moving on. The storm rolled on through the night, but the worst of it passed without taking a single life on our street. As dawn broke, gray, wet, exhausted, the sensors were still turning. One had a bent vane. Another wore a scrape from flying debris. All of them worked. Neighbors emerged slowly. Some houses were scarred, shingles missing, fences down, but every front door still stood. Except one. Celeste's house across the street sat dark and silent, windows blown out, roof peeled back like a lid. She was gone by morning, taken somewhere safer by the deputy, wrapped in a blanket, no clipboard, no orders left to give. My daughter sat on the front step beside me, wrapped in a towel, watching the sensors blink. "Are they staying?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "They're staying." She leaned against my shoulder, finally letting herself relax. Later that morning, as emergency crews rolled in and neighbors checked on each other, someone taped a handwritten note to the old HOA bulletin board near the pool gate. It read, "Warnings save lives. Silence doesn't. No signature, no vote, just truth." I looked up at the roof one more time as the wind faded to a breeze. The sensors turned quietly, constant, unbothered, free. Final closing line. The sky will always speak. The only question is who's brave enough to listen.